Tonight, Ukraine's pitch. The president of the war-torn country makes the case for U.S. aid in the fight against Russia.
And push for a ceasefire. The United Nations votes on a resolution demanding an immediate truce in the Israel-Hamas war.
Plus, impeachment inquiry.
It is a deeply sad day.
Republicans in the House set to investigate the president.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Ukraine's president returns to Washington as time runs out for a foreign aid funding deal. Thanks for joining us for Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder.
Good evening from Washington. I'm John Jessup. Well, nearly 2 years into Russia's invasion into Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky is here in the nation's capital making a personal plea to lawmakers for more U.S. help.
His goal is to boost bipartisan support for funding he says supports humanitarian, financial, and military aid. CBN News Washington correspondent Hillary Powell is following Zelensky's visit. Hillary, what's at stake here?
Well, the White House is warning that American aid to Ukraine could run dry as talks over new assistance are stalled in Congress. Now, that is why President Joe Biden has invited President Zelensky to Washington to help underscore the urgency in approving a new package worth tens of billions of dollars. The White House warns the already approved American aid will be exhausted by year's end.
Just thank you for the invitation, and I'd like to thank America and our partners for the support.
Ukrainian President Zelensky's high-stakes mission led to a face-to-face with President Biden Tuesday to ask for help. Biden wants an additional $110 billion U.S. aid package combining Ukraine, Israel, and other national security needs, a request that could collapse in Congress. Zelensky made no comment as he entered private meetings with U.S. senators.
It was a very powerful meeting. President Zelensky made it so clear how he needs help, but if he gets the help, he can win this war. And he outlined in some great detail, the kind of help he needs and how it will help him win. Even many of our Republican colleagues talked about we are winning this war.
As the Russian invasion grinds toward a third year, with U.S. funding hanging in the balance, top Republicans are adamant about not supporting additional funding without major changes to immigration policy.
What the Biden administration seems to be asking for is billions of additional dollars with no appropriate oversight, no clear strategy to win, and none of the answers that I think the American people are owed.
Meanwhile, the war wages on. Millions of Ukrainians reportedly losing cell phone and internet coverage after a major hacking attack. Earlier this week, National Security Council spokesman John Kirby warned about the potential for more civilian danger.
So to make it very clear to President Zelensky and the Ukrainian people that we're going to continue to support them, particularly at this very difficult time. As winter approaches, we're seeing now increased missile and drone attacks by the Russian armed forces against civilian infrastructure.
U.S. intelligence officials say Russian leaders believe achieving a military deadlock through winter could drain Western support for Ukraine and ultimately give Russia the advantage. Now, to be clear, some GOP lawmakers oppose any additional aid for Ukraine at all. The White House insists this is the right time for this aid package because President Biden is really pushing lawmakers to approve funding before the holiday recess.
All right, CBN's Hillary Powell. Thank you so much, Hillary. Well, Michael O'Hanlon is the Director of Research and Foreign Policy at the Brookings Institution, and he joins us now. Michael, welcome to you. So, in your opinion, what does Ukraine need most from the United States? Is it money? Is it more weapons? Its leading and continued role in rallying the global effort amid public supports that's declining?
Hi, John and Jenna. Well, I think that air and missile defense needs to be near the top of anyone's list because we're starting to see these expected Russian barrages of Ukrainian cities, not just the ones near the front lines, but even the capital, even cities further west. And that's designed to take down electricity and heating infrastructure and just make life miserable for the Ukrainian people in the coldest, darkest part of the winter. So that's certainly one big part. And last year, we all worked hard as an alliance to bring a lot of different kinds of air defense and missile defense systems to Ukraine, which collectively worked pretty well. So that's certainly near the top of the list. Ukraine's government does need a lot of financial help. The Europeans have been doing more than we have to help on that front, and that's good. There really has been a fair amount of burden sharing across the Western alliance on helping Ukraine. The Europeans have tended to do a bit more on the economic side, and of course, a lot more on the refugee absorption side. We've done a bit more on the military side, and collectively, it's been a huge and remarkable effort. But I think the other area that we have to keep our eye on as U.S. funding draws down is ammunition, really, in the short term. It's not so much the tanks and the artillery. I think the Ukrainians have a lot of that. It's not so much the fighter jets, because that's going to be a process that takes time to get the fighter jets over there and train people up on them. But I think it's artillery, it's other kinds of ammunition, and making sure the Russians don't have opportunities for breakthrough. There is this interesting push and pull where some advocates for Ukraine are saying the aid is needed now in order to make sure that Russia can't win. And some are saying it's needed now in terms of helping Ukraine win. And this just goes to underscore that, war is not an exact science. And there's a lot of analytical room for debate and uncertainty here about where the uncertainty or where the vulnerability is greatest. But certainly by the time you get into the 2024, Ukraine's going to need our help, or it's going to be in big trouble.
Yeah, Michael, if foreign aid funding doesn't get passed, what kind of message does that send to American allies?
Well, it sends a complicated message. I'm not going to paint it as all doom and gloom. It would be very bad for Ukraine. But of course, Ukraine is not really an ally. It's a close friend. There's no treaty that commits us to Ukraine's defense. So in that regard, you could still make a distinction. However, that starts to raise questions about Taiwan, because Taiwan is also not a formal ally. And we know that China has an interest in coercing Taiwan back to the motherland, so to speak. And so we could send a message to China that America is not really willing to stand up for its friends, only its formal treaty allies, and that could be dangerous for Taiwan. But in the immediate term, it's obviously going to be dangerous for Ukraine. If they lose the world superpower as their close friend, I think Russia's going to be emboldened, and Russia's going to start looking for opportunities as 2024 unfolds to go on the offensive again.
Real quickly here, you just mentioned Russia. There's a newly declassified U.S. intel report that estimates some 350,000 or 15,000 Russian troops have been killed or injured since the invasion started. Michael, in about half a minute that we have, how long do you think the war can last?
Well, Russia has built up its army again. That headline was correct, but slightly misleading, because Russia's already mobilized another 300,000 troops since that time. And they may not be quite as good, but they're actually fighting better, because they're fighting proper defensive warfare right now. Russia has 3.5 times the population of Ukraine. So the long-term trend is in Russia's favor, I'm afraid, in terms of demographics.
We're going to have to leave it there. The Brookings Institution, Michael O'Hanlon. Michael, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you kindly.
Well, tonight, a major vote at the United Nations over a ceasefire in Gaza. It comes as Israel has started pumping seawater into Hamas tunnels in Gaza to flood and destroy the terror network's underground infrastructure. That, according to reporting from the Wall Street Journal. Meanwhile, the emergency session at the United Nations General Assembly set to vote on a draft resolution demanding an immediate ceasefire between Hamas and Israel.
Yeah, the vote comes just days after the U.S. vetoed a UN Security Council demand for a ceasefire. And on the same day, President Biden, speaking to Democratic donors in Washington, said Israel is losing support amid the heavy bombardment of Gaza. Meanwhile, Israel has opened a second humanitarian crossing to speed up aid deliveries to Gaza. The World Food Program reports that half of Gaza's population is starving. Some 2 million Palestinians now homeless, many living in tent cities. As Israel's military makes gains on the battlefield, including the arrest of some 500 Hamas terrorists, there are still some 138 hostages held captive by the terror group. Israelis today protesting outside the Israeli Knesset, demanding the government do more to release the hostages.
Also in Washington today, House Republicans reached a pivotal moment in their push to impeach President Joe Biden.
A formal vote on whether or not to pursue an official impeachment inquiry could come as soon as tomorrow. At question are the president's business dealings involving his son Hunter Biden and foreign countries. Capitol Hill correspondent Matt Galka has more.
We are here to determine a process, not an outcome. We are here to assert our Article 1 responsibilities, not to act as judge or jury. And we are here fundamentally to chart a path forward that unveils the facts to the public.
The House Rules Committee debated a resolution authorizing a formal impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden. Biden's son, Hunter, remains at the center of the probe, including what role his father may have played in his business dealings and whether or not it impacted U.S. foreign policy. To Democrats, it adds up to revenge on behalf of former President Donald Trump and an attempt to smear the current administration.
All of this is happening because House Republican leaders refuse to abide by the election results. They're upset Trump lost. He's upset he lost. Some of them still don't even believe he lost. Many of them are upset that the insurrection didn't succeed on January 6th. And today, they want to finish the job.
A vote approving the formal inquiry can help Republicans enforce subpoenas and gain access to documents related to Biden and his family. The National Archives is set to release 62,000 additional documents related to Republican requests, including emails between Biden and his son sent using aliases. House Speaker Mike Johnson backs the formal inquiry.
We have no choice. To fulfill our constitutional responsibility, we have to take the next step. We're not making a political decision. It's not. It's a legal decision. So people have feelings about it one way or the other. We can't prejudge the outcome. The Constitution does not permit us to do so. We have to follow the truth where it takes us, and that is exactly what we're going to do.
Johnson had previously been critical of the Democrats' pursuit of impeachment of the former president.
I know that people are frustrated sometimes with the time that's being invested in this, but this is the way the founders anticipated that something like this would go. There shouldn't be any such thing as a snap impeachment, a sham impeachment like the Democrats did against President Trump.
The goal of this week's full House vote would allow for the pursuit of evidence to continue, and that could eventually lead to a full impeachment vote. Republicans can only afford to lose 3 Republican votes, and Democrats are trying to convince GOP members in Biden districts that a vote for the inquiry could sink their re-election chances. Matt Gelka, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Matt. And for more, let's bring in Nathan Gonzalez, editor and publisher of Inside Elections and a Faith Nation contributor. Nathan, good to see you this evening. So what do you make of this possible impeachment inquiry into the president? And do you think it'll actually happen?
Well, we shouldn't be surprised, Jenna. I mean, we've been heading down this track for a while. It was as close to a campaign promise that the Republicans made in the 2022 elections. And one thing stuck out to me with Speaker Johnson's comments is whenever you hear a politician on Capitol Hill say this is not political, it is precisely political. It doesn't mean that it's not worth going through the exercise. Republicans are at the stage now where I don't think they have shown that there is clear wrongdoing by the president, but it doesn't mean they can't still do political damage to the president, because Americans have, I think, a disposition to disapprove of politicians or believe that politicians are corrupt. And so by throwing out, check numbers and dates and things, it filters into what voters already believe about politicians. And so it could hurt Biden, even if they don't formally impeach him in the end.
Well, as you were saying, it seems like a lot of smoke. So far, no smoking gun. The committee investigating has not shown anything connecting the president to Hunter Biden's business dealings just yet. But do you think this impeachment inquiry could be different? Could it potentially implicate President Biden?
Sure. I mean, it's possible. We should be open-minded. I mean, we should be, I think we should want politicians to be held accountable. But at some point, if the evidence that Republicans are hoping is there doesn't pop up, then you have to move in another direction. It seems like a lot of what Republicans have so far, some of it takes place in the time when Vice President Biden was not vice president, or he was not president. It was in those years when Trump was president, and so it's up to Republicans to I think to really find those connections beyond the Hunter Biden being President Biden's son.
And Jenna, if I can real quickly, I should say the potential for a impeachment inquiry. I misspoke.
We'll see what happens.
Impeachment inquiry.
Yeah. Nathan, while we still have you here, I want to talk 2024. There's a new poll from the Wall Street Journal that paints a pretty grim picture for the White House. Americans were asked between President Biden and former President Trump, whose policies have done more to help or hurt you. In the help category, Trump 49%, Biden just 23%. In the hurt category, Trump 27%, Biden a whopping 53%. Nathan, more tough polling for President Biden. How do you read this one?
Yeah, I think grim for Democrats, the word you used, is accurate. If the election were held today, I think Trump wins. I'm not even sure that it's close. And part of it is that voters are upset with the current situation and the economy, security, crime, whatever it might be. They're holding Biden responsible, and they're thinking more fondly either about how Trump handled things, they're remembering that fondly, or they believe that he's going to do better. So the fight over the next year is going to either be Biden restoring confidence in his ability to handle issues, or painting more doubt in the minds of voters about how Trump would really handle the issues that they are concerned about.
All right, Nathan Gonzalez with Inside Elections. Thank you so much for your time and insights, Nathan.
Good to see you guys.
You too. Well, from inflation to interest rates, we'll break down the latest on the American economy right after this.
Well, welcome back. Falling gas prices seem to be easing inflation, according to today's latest Consumer Price Index figures. The Labor Department report shows inflation slowed to 3.1% in November. That's compared to 3.2% a month ago. While there was a slight increase in food expenses, energy costs fell 2.3% in November, with gas prices bolstering that decline, down 6% for the month. This new inflation data comes as the Federal Reserve today kicked off 2 days of meetings on interest rate policy. At 3.1%, inflation is still well above the Fed's 2% goal, but it's unlikely a rate hike will be announced when the meeting wraps up tomorrow. Well, here with us now is Stephen Skanke, Chief Economic Advisor at Keel Point. Stephen, the feeling is that the Fed will hold rates steady. Beyond that, though, what are you looking to hear? A lot of analysts are talking about the rate cuts being cut next year.
Well, that's exactly right. The Fed is not going to increase rates tomorrow, so we're really interested in seeing what their new summary of economic projections is. This is their so-called dot plot. They still have on their last summary of economic projections one more rate increase this year, so we'll be interested to see how they deal with that, whether they move it into January or sometime into next year. Markets generally expect rates to start cutting, beginning as early as March, more likely in May, and then cut about 0.25% every 6 weeks at the Fed's meetings thereafter. The CPI number this morning was actually helpful to Fed Chair Powell. There had been some tension that he was trying to damp down expectations of rate cuts beginning next March. It looks now like markets expect that not to happen, probably until May. And so the announcement tomorrow will be a lot more smooth and probably a lot more accommodating to consumer and market expectations.
Yeah. So gas prices down 23 cents in the last month, a major contributor to falling inflation. Stephen, still in other sectors like of the economy, like housing, it's a very different story. The Wall Street Journal reporting with mortgage rates more than double where they were 2 years ago. Many would-be home buyers are tapping out. Your thoughts?
Well, that's exactly right, Jenna. The mortgage rates are up. Now, the good news is that they've come back from where they were at 8%, and the 10-year Treasury rate, which is sort of a benchmark rate for setting mortgages, has come back from 5%. It was down at 4.1 last week. It's back up to about 4.2. So it is looking somewhat better for people who want to buy homes and get mortgages. And there's a general belief. And the consumer sentiment out from University of Michigan last week is that mortgage rates will come down, inflation will come down, gasoline prices will continue to come down. So consumer sentiment overall is picking up a little bit. It's also one of those things where time works in the favor of a home buyer and consumers generally as we get more and more out of the throes of the inflation that we had 15 months ago.
Yeah. All right, Stephen Skanke with Keel Point. Thank you, Stephen. Good to see you.
Thanks, Steve.
Great to be with you. Thanks.
Anti-Semitism on the rise around the globe. More on the fallout of the Israel-Hamas war when Faith Nation returns. Welcome back. The October 7th terror attack by Hamas not only provoked the war in Gaza, it also sparked a surge in anti-Semitism both here in the United States and around the world. After a failure to condemn calls for genocide at a congressional hearing last week, the president of the University of Pennsylvania resigned, while calls for other college presidents to step down grow louder. Harvard President Claudine Gay, also under fire, will remain in her post, according to the Ivy University's board. The firestorm comes as the Department of Education investigates at least 15 schools and universities for reports of discrimination. With anti-Semitism on the rise in Europe and around the world, lawmakers address the issue today on Capitol Hill.
After years of rising anti-Semitism in Europe, we are seeing a terrifying surge in anti-Jewish hatred after Hamas's October 7th attack. In the 2 months since Hamas's massacre of over 1,200 men, women, and children, synagogues and other Jewish institutions have been burned. Jewish memorials vandalized. Jews attacked in their homes and on the street.
All right, to Texas and the battle over abortion. A woman who challenged a Texas abortion law left the state hours before the state Supreme Court ruled against her. Texas outlaws abortion unless the mother's life is in danger. A judge ruled Kate Cox qualified for the medical exemption, but the state's high court put a hold on the decision after the Attorney General filed an appeal. Before the court made its decision, she left Texas to have the procedure in another state. Cox's 20-week-old was disabled, and her doctor said the pregnancy posed a risk to her health and fertility.
Coming up, treats for troops. More on this holiday tradition next on Faith Nation. Well, finally tonight, it's no surprise when families and friends gather together this Christmas, many will be exchanging gifts. I'll give you a gift too, Jenna.
All right, I can't wait. And while they can't be here in the U.S. to share in the festivities, one Pennsylvania couple is making it their goal to make sure military members serving overseas feel right at home for the holidays. Each year, Sandy and Fred Cleveland send care packages to deployed troops. The boxes are filled with snacks, toiletries, and even thank you notes. This year, they have handwritten cards from Fred and local elementary school students. Fred says he got the idea during a friend's Christmas deployment. 17 years later, they and a team of volunteers were able to pack over 100 boxes to send to troops this year. Well done. That's great to see.
How thoughtful. I'm sure those treats actually mean so much to those troops.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, thanks for watching.
Have a great night.